Hi everyone, welcome to episode 26 of The Green Room. I'm here with my colleague Nick and my colleague Harry. How are you guys this week?
Yeah, good.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're right.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm excellent, in fact.
Good. I'm so excellent. There's no football on.
Well, no, I mean, disappointing.
Yeah.
For your guys yesterday.
Is that because I'm beating you in our fantasy football league?
You are beating me. The problem is I don't know how to transfer players in and out. So, fine. You know, it is what it is. I'm not doing so well. Right, this week we've had some comments on our podcast and our video blog, which some people are describing it as.
Yes.
Which is great. So keep those comments coming. And before we start, do you want to just say a little bit about what the Green Room does and who we're trying to target and how you can listen to us?
Yes. So the Green Room is all about bringing those burning energy saving and energy efficiency topics and renewable topics to the living room, to your cars, to wherever you're listening actually.
The bath.
If you're on holiday as well, because you can find us on podcasts. Or you can watch us on YouTube, as James said. So whenever I really get stuck about where I can find us, although I do listen to all
I love
podcasts,
the way you watch us back. That makes me happy.
Yeah. It's the highlight at the end of the week. You know,
I can imagine.
It's how I
Friday night.
It's how I rewind. You know, how I unwind. Rewind by watching, but unwind in front of the.
Very clever.
I go on top of the Green Age website. Next to the energy saving guides, there's a link to the podcast, and then I scroll down, and then that gives me a range of options of where I can download the podcast. One of them being Podbean, the other being TuneIn Radio, the other one being Apple and Spotify, and
Stitcher.
Stitcher's number 5, and then obviously you can also watch us on YouTube.
And I found out this week that there are lots of other ways you can subscribe to our podcast via different mediums. Anyway. I'm not going to bore you with a further list.
And if you've got the, I think as a YouTube Premium, you can download the video and watch it anytime. And also, I think you can download it as an audio file. But
so we've bored everyone now how you can listen to us or watch us. What are we talking about this week?
So it's about what is the cheapest way to heat your home.
So we wrote a blog probably 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
More than that.
And it was really popular.
5 years.
No, it wasn't 5 years. It wasn't 5 years. Anyway, it was a while ago.
Anyway.
It was a while ago. Time flies. We have fun.
Yes.
You know, in your company, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, we wrote this blog, and it was really popular. And we got actually thousands of people reading it every day, which was awesome. But we haven't really touched on it since. So what we thought we'd do is just do it via this different format. So we were just going to have a discussion around it.
I mean, did you want to answer sort of questions that we get on YouTube? Do we sort of leave that to the end, or do we build it into the discussion?
We could, if someone has what the question is.
Well, there was some doubts by a gentleman who left us comments on episode 25 about the efficiencies of condensing boilers.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, let's see if we touch on that. We probably will.
Yeah.
Go through that. So, if I were to give you a big pot of money, and you had to put a new heating system in your home that was going to be uber efficient, what would you do and why?
Controversy done.
Go.
Gas.
Right.
Central heating.
Okay. Why?
Well, so it's dependent on the stipulation that I'm already connected to the gas grid. So I've got So you haven't told me whether I need to connect to the gas grid.
No, you're connected. I mean, this is all hypothetical. So you are connected to the gas grid.
And have I got the radiator infrastructure in the house?
I can give you radiators because otherwise it's going to be tricky. Yep.
Okay, fine. So so then it's just about whether that boiler that's in that house, whether that's efficient. If not, I might want to swap it. So that kind of touches on what we discussed last week. But the main driver of why I've said that decision is mainly because what the price of gas is in relation to electricity. So at the minute, gas is about a third of the price of electricity.
Okay, so how much, if I'm looking on my energy bill, what kind of numbers am I looking for gas and electricity?
So you are typically, so let's say what's an average, like three bedroom semi-detached house, you're talking 1,350, 1,400 quid a year total.
Okay, just over £100 a month.
Harry, is that sort of current figures? And then out of that, now depending upon how you obviously use a property in terms of your heating and hot water and lighting demand, anywhere between 2/3 to 3/4 is driven by space heating. So that's termed, i.e. the 6 or 7 months or 8 months in the year when you use the gas system.
And it's about now, right? It's about, so we're October the 1st.
Yep.
And it's about now, everyone's like, right, boom, fire up the heating. Yeah, and then it runs to end of March, April-ish.
Depending upon when the season is. And then obviously the rest of it is hot water demand, and then you'll have some stuff for gadgets and for lighting and stuff like that. But typically, so say 2/3 to 3/4 on your gas bill, and then the rest on electricity.
Okay, fine. So and the reason you have said gas is because it's cheaper.
So it's cheaper, but then all the other little bits and pieces so convenient. So it's this power source that I don't have to top up or feed on. I'm connected.
Fine. So yes, the initial install cost, if you didn't have anything but you had connection to a gas grid, so you could connect a boiler and plumb a boiler in, you're looking at spending on an average house probably £4,000 or £5,000 if you've got to put radiators in and the whole lot, right? And there's a lot of upheaval because you've got to pull floorboards up potentially, you've got to run pipework everywhere. If you're up in, if you need to put the boiler up a few floors up, you've got to get a flue and you've got to sort of, get scaffold in the other side to make good the hole that you're putting in the wall where the flue sticks out. So there are some real costs associated with it. If you were, so I'm going to do a few scenarios here, because I would say actually electric heating, and there are loads of types, I'm going to go through a few of them, but electric heating is actually, when you said it was very easy, gas central heating, because it runs off your radiator.
But that was on the assumption, that you gave me some radiators and a connection.
Yes.
To the gas grid.
But if I've got nothing, actually, electric heating's really convenient.
Well, you can just buy it and plug it in.
Yeah, exactly. So I buy it, plug it in. I spend a premium on running that heater, but actually, for convenience-wise and for install cost initially, it's probably the cheapest way to go, I'd say. The issue is I can go and buy an electric heater from, B&Q, our old favourites, for about £20, right? And I plug it in and it makes hot air, essentially. Yes. Heats the room. They're really expensive to run, as you were saying, because the cost of electricity is so much more. But if you delve down, and we'll do it with gas heating systems as well, but if you delve down into electrical heating systems, there are loads of different types. Right, so the most basic form is this kind of B&Q electric heater, but then we could start going on and start talking about storage heaters, heat pumps, and that sort of thing, and suddenly, actually, maybe the running costs aren't as different as your gas central heating.
But the complexities start to go up. Yes.
Absolutely.
So you've got your plug-in heaters. Then the next level kind of complexity in terms of install, you might want to get electric panel heaters, so normal fan heaters, but wired in, to the sockets and properly fitted. Well, you still need to then call the electrician out. They still need to run necessary cables, to make sure that, when they are running it onto the circuit, the circuit can take the load. And you've got those issues with storage heaters and infrared, for instance. Yeah. So you're still going to have installation costs, but I absolutely granted, you're not going to have the upheaval necessarily in terms of putting pipes around and radiators. So that's the key thing. So that installation cost up front, even if it's minimal, it will be up to a quarter, say, of what it is for the
gas. But I think the other thing worth saying is, so we work closely with London EPC, right? And this company goes and does energy saving and produces energy performance certificates. So basically, we were speaking about the other day in the office. They had a case where they went and did a energy survey for a company, and it came back that the rating was essentially bloody awful. Yeah. Right, and it was because there was no heating in this brand new flat because they hadn't put the heating system in. They then went back and revisited the property, and the electric heaters had been installed, and they were just plug-in electric heaters, and they really didn't improve the energy performance certificate rating at all, right? So people, I think, have to start taking into account that. So they've paid X amount for these slightly snazzy electric heaters that are based on thermostats and stuff, but it didn't really improve the energy rating.
Because the way SAP is designed, it's not just a function of the efficiency of how the heating source runs. It's to do also with energy prices. So it's factored in that, in relation to other fuels, how much does it cost to run on electricity?
Okay, but so that being said, so if we're going to go with electric heating, it's probably worth looking.
And this is why, going on to 80%, this is why when you recommend storage heaters, the storage heaters gives you the highest value for an electric heater, apart from the heat pumps.
But only if that is listed on the EPC approved list of heaters.
Correct.
It has to be a high heat retention storage heater.
Yes.
That's on a specific list, which we will put a link to because it's really hard to find.
Yeah,
online.
it is. It is. It's really hard to find this list, and it's all the heaters. So the DEC at the time produced this list of heaters that basically, if you were on that list, your heater was thought to be really energy efficient. And mainly, with electric heating, 1 unit of electricity makes 1 unit of useful heat. Yeah? So what they're saying is that's all good and well, but if you can control the heat output via a thermostat or via a programmer, i.e. it starts to begin to make the electric heating a bit more intelligent, then it's more efficient.
All new storage heaters since January 2018 have thermostats.
Yes. But this is the thing, but not all of those storage heaters that do have the thermostats are on this list. So you're picking generic electric storage heater with thermostats doesn't necessarily improve the EPC rating as much as one from this list. So we need to share that list so you can go and have a look online and you can find that on the website.
And the key thing about this high heating retention storage heaters is what I said about the price of electricity, because that's what they use. So when you're on an economy 7 or 9 or 10 tariff, in the off-peak hours when you utilise a cheaper rate, the point of these high retention storage heaters is that they can store all that cheap energy that you inside and then release it the times when it's more expensive. So therefore, it's utilising this. Certainly in the EPC software, that's why it gives it the credit.
But also in real life, right? So at the moment we've got gas and a unit of gas central heating. A unit of gas is like 3.5p. Bit less. But that's why people tend to think gas central heating is the way forward, which is why you said it. But then we move to electric. Electric is expensive. It's about 14p ish.
12.5, 13.
But then you need to include the standing charges that are spent over it. But yes, so we're looking around the sort of 14p mark ish, give or take. And so hence people suddenly think straight away gas is better. But now this is the one I wanted to throw at you. So if I have electric heaters, so say there's 5 rooms in my house, right? Kitchen, sitting room, 2 bedrooms, whatever those rooms are. With electric heating, if I'm not in those rooms, it's incredibly easy to isolate my heating requirements. So I can just put the heating on in one room. Whereas with a radiator system, yes, you can start putting controls on each radiator, but the boiler still has to fire up if I want hot water to travel through the radiators. Yeah? So there's that level of efficiency gains that I make with electric heating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is where, and probably alluding to comments we've had, this is so when people slate gas central heating systems, they don't contextualize that's what they mean, what you've just said there. So the fact that it's firing the heating, all around the house and stuff, then obviously there's going to be efficiency losses there. But the unit itself, the combustion process of the boiler itself is very efficient.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and especially now with condensing boilers.
And that's a difference, yeah. But actually, how efficient has your whole heating system run? Once it goes from a boiler, that's a really tricky thing because it's dependent on fabric, it's dependent on how clean your system is, TRVs or how big the property is as well.
Yeah, 100%. But on paper then, so gas is cheaper than electric. But then we started. So you bought in storage heaters. Now storage heaters are running on economy 7, right? So it utilizes cheaper electricity at night, and therefore to heat your house. So therefore, if you're running your house efficiently with new storage heaters, it is more efficient and cheaper, I guess, than running it with just panel electric heaters.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're starting to get a bit of a list here. So then, What other types of electric heating are we going to talk about?
Infrared,
Infrared, go on.
we know quite a bit about.
Go on, explain to me how infrared works.
Infrared is basically, so rather than heat the air in the room,
Which is what my radiators do,
so
which is what panel heater
convection
does.
current. So I and scientifically this you're going to correct me, but I always think of warm air travels into cold space, so you get convection currents like that. So from your heating source, it's traveling via convection currents to the cold parts of the room, and then the air circulates, and that's how the volume of the room gets warm, because the air of the room gets warm.
The air gets warm. Yeah.
Whereas the infrared, it's a direct emitting heating source. So basically, when you turn the heating source on, it travels via infrared rays. So it has to find physical objects that it can absorb that light and energy into. So therefore, the surface of the skin, the furnishing, the walls, they get warm, but the kind of intermediate volume of the room doesn't.
And the best example for people to conceptualize it is basically when it's freezing cold in the middle of winter, right? It's 2-3 degrees, but it's a beautifully sunny day.
Yes.
If you walk out and the sun is hitting your face, you don't feel cold, right? You feel the warmth of the sun, and that is infrared. Yeah.
The other one is as well. So the redness of your log fire.
Yes. Which is why in the old
infrared.
days, have you ever seen those? They're almost like these with the speakers here. They're kind of plates that stops the direct heat. Have you ever seen those?
It's like a grate, yeah.
So it's like genuinely. I mean, it's kind of the same function as this. It stops the direct infrared hitting your face.
Might have been before my time.
Yeah, it may have been before your time. It was definitely before my time. This is when open fires were a big thing. Anywho, so that's infrared heating, yeah.
So yeah, anyway, just to kind of go into install cost wise, so if you want them to be wired into the circuits and stuff like that, so you're looking probably installation cost wise the same as storage heaters.
Now, so yes, you are. So storage heaters, we're looking at for a new storage heater unit, one that is on this approved list. You're looking at about £700 per heater, right? You can definitely buy cheaper ones than that, but they may not have the same impact on your EPC rating if that is what you're interested in. Yeah, so the minimum energy efficiency standards, which is where you're trying to rent out properties and you have to get them to a certain level, just bear that in mind.
But they are how do you say, ergonomically ideal for say rooms, and they are because you can get them like with your favourite painting or picture.
This is the infrared heaters we're talking about now. Yeah,
they are aesthetically the best.
We've got that nice mirror one in our office. Right?
Yeah. No, they're really clever.
Yeah, there's a shaving mirror as well, and that's
in the office. No, they're. I think they're really clever. I think the issue with them is no infrared heater, as far as I know, is on that list of energy efficient, sort of the list of better heaters. No, exactly. So what it means is you might spend, that mirror one, if we had to pay for it, it might cost £1,000. Yeah, but actually, it's not going to improve your efficiency rating. It's the same essentially as a plug-in electric heater that I go and buy from B&Q for 30.
But the idea being though is it can run on less heat output.
Yes.
So therefore it doesn't effectively, after say when the room reaches thermal mass, it doesn't need to run on as much power to give you that useful heat.
And the reason is because normally, we're in a room now with hot air heating, which is convection heating, which is kind of standard. I've got to heat every area of the room to feel warm. So I walk in and the air's warm and I feel warm. If there's a cold draft that takes that warm air out, suddenly feels cooler. Right, with the infrared comes from the panel or from the emitter, whatever it is, hits me, I absorb it and feel warm. So go on, Harry, you've got something here.
We had a blog up, we put it up last year sometime, and it was all about cheapest electric heaters to run. And one of the things that kept getting said on the comment section was, this is completely useless, this blog, because you haven't compared the same wattage of each heater. And that's because if we were measuring the same wattage of each heater, it would be exactly the same cost. It's the warmth that you need.
That's the issue.
Wattage of infrared and a higher one of storage heater. That's why.
And that's the big selling point of infrared. So if you go and speak to an infrared manufacturer, and it's true because we've had them in the office and they work very well. The wattage required per square meter or per cubic meter is lower than a comparative convection electric heater. right? So that's why, in theory, I can use a lower wattage heater,
But
so it's cheaper to
It's
run.
important to say that these infrared heaters are not like the ones you see at train stations where they glow. So these are far infrared heaters.
They're fine, whereas the orange ones are near infrared.
Yeah.
And we've got one of those in the front of our warehouse.
Yeah, that's a
And-
medium infrared.
Yeah, but it's nice, right?
Yeah.
Because it glows, and if you stand in front of it, you feel real warmth.
If people want to find out more about electric heating, then we've covered it in a bit more detail in episode 4.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we've gone through gas central heating, and we've gone through your panel heaters, your storage heaters, and your infrared heaters. So now, where do you want to go? What other forms of heating?
Just to then on those first two. So let's just quickly run through the costs. So an annual, so at 12,000 kilowatt hours a year. So I would say that's probably a 1 to 2 bedroom flat. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's going to cost you £542 a year to run your gas
it's a
central
very
heating.
exact figure.
It's based on off-gem figures from 2017, so it's slightly out of date, but
Okay.
not miles off.
And then for an electric central heating system,
Yeah,
so it's going to cost you £776 a year.
but that's based on a panel heater. In theory, an infrared would be lower than that. Yeah, I mean these are assumptions we have to make because the infrared you'd feel more warmth for less wattage essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that bill would be a lot lower if you had storage heaters and you were using them correctly, which not everybody.
Not everyone does with storage heaters. Storage heaters, the key is you're using the cheaper electricity at night to charge the storage heater, and then that's released during the day. The issue with storage heaters is that if you have high electricity consumption on stuff that isn't for heating, so you've got TVs and radios and you have a big fish tank or all this kind of stuff, you're using a lot of electricity in the house, the electricity during the day is more expensive. Yeah, so if I'm paying sort of 14p for a unit of electricity on a standard tariff, on the economy 7 tariff, while it's cheaper at night, it's now much more than 14p during the day, so it might be 19, 20p. So you've got to have a look at that and weigh it up and think about your electricity usage. And we have a lot of people that call us and say, right, I've got old storage heaters. And old storage heaters are typically not very good because they leak this stored heat. What should I do? And if they don't have lots of money, we wouldn't suggest install gas central heating in that circumstance because it's going to be hugely disruptive and expensive.
And very often those electric-only houses are there electric-only for specific reasons. And that reason could be because, obviously the gas network has probably not come to that.
Or it's a flat on the 11th floor of a block or whatever. So then it's, do you put new storage heaters in or do you go to infrared? If you go, or other panel heaters, if you're going to a standard other electric heater that is not storage heater, you need to change your electricity tariff from economy 7 to a single tariff. Yeah? Worth noting. Okay, so then we're now going to go. So we're still on electric heating. So the other one to talk about is heat pumps. So you mentioned it.
So did you want I just want to run costs on LPG and oil. So
we haven't done those yet. We haven't even talked about them yet. We want to finish electric.
I was just thinking about the bad kind of the combusting fuels.
Okay.
And then we'll go on to the heat pumps.
Do you want to talk about the irony of electric heating being produced from gas anyway in the gas power stations? No, should we gloss over that?
So just really quick. So LPG central heating. So it's similar to your gas, but unlike the gas coming from a network, you've got to buy it in yourself and then store it in tanks essentially, and then feed your boiler.
Yeah.
Very very common in rural areas.
Yeah.
So and cost-wise comparison on the same 12,000 kilowatt hours, you're looking effectively costs at about 25 to 30% more than central heating. Then on oil, again, combusting fuel, because obviously the price of oil goes up and down at the minute.
But as it does with gas. It does with electricity, which is based on, normally in our country, in the UK, it's based on gas anyway.
LPG prices were falling for a few years, but they went up again last year.
And they will probably go up this year because there's all sorts of fun and games going on in the Middle East at the moment.
So oil at the minute, you're looking at kind of comparable pricing to run to your gas central heating, but that might not be the case, because I think oil is more is more real time responsive than gas. Gas sort of changes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just the way they do the kind of energy contracts, whereas gas is kind of more traded real time. I've no idea, but at the minute they're kind of comparable, but both bad for the environment.
Yes, they are, absolutely. And I think the other thing with oil central heating, because when my first where I lived when I was younger, sorry, that was rubbish speaking, but when my first house when I lived, we had a big central heating run on oil, right? And I remember on Christmas Day we ran out of oil.
Oh no.
And my mum lost her shit, basically. It was the funniest thing ever. But
it was obviously your dad's fault.
Obviously. But it was
oil boiler, one as big as you.
It was so funny. But it's that is one of the real issues with it. And you were talking about, sort of biomass and bits and pieces earlier, where you have to make sure that there is sufficient fuel. With gas central heating, with electric central heating, you can kind of just forget they're there. Because there should, unless something really bad happens, there should always be gas coming out of your gas meter.
Yes.
And there should be electric coming out of your electric meter. Electricity, coming out of the electric meter. Whereas oil, if you do forget, like my family, you then don't have any heating. And it's the same with the LPG. If you run out of your gas, then you're stuck. So you got to think about those things. So I'd say there's a sort of associated cost of just inconvenience.
Yes. So moving the conversation on a little bit. So going on to and I was a little bit kind of facetious by saying what you said. What do you want? I said gas, but it's not my ideal heating source that I'd have. Well, if certain criteria were met out there, then I would change my mind. So I'm not like a gas guzzler or anything like that. It's just it's convenience and it's efficiency and it's cost, which I think kind of the majority of the public's at. But if I could kind of start from the beginning, if I, for instance, say the current energy mix, if it was a bit more weighted towards battery storage, we had a bit more renewables in the network, we had a bit more low carbon energy generating resources for electricity. If I could rebuild my heating system from scratch, I would go for an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump, depending where I'm at. And the reason for that is one, because the environment is close to my heart, and secondly is the practicality of not having a combusting product in your house.
Do you want to explain how they work very briefly?
I think you're the king at
basically
heat pumps.
Okay, fine. The reason I put you on the spot there was because I don't know.
Can you talk about your sister's house?
So heat pumps run on electricity, and an air source heat pump is taking latent heat from the air. The ground source heat pump is taking heat from the ground, and a water source heat pump is taking heat from water source. But basically, it's just minute differences that they're taking advantage of. And you basically compress this using a compressor, and it drives the temperature up dramatically. The issue is that the resulting hot water is nowhere near as hot as, say, if you were to run a boiler, right? So, if I run a boiler, water comes out at 65, 75 degrees, something like that. If I'm running a heat pump, the higher I want to push the temperature, the more electricity I need to work the compressor, which takes the efficiency down.
And that just answers. I mean, that kind of closes the loop of what I was about to say. So the reason it doesn't work for me at the minute is because I could have an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump, and I could take my electricity from the nearest coal-fired power station. So whilst it would all be great, I've got a low carbon generating heat source, I'm actually using the electricity to top up that compressor from a...
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I think that's why. This is why I think it's really interesting about current government policy. They're really trying to push towards no gas central heating systems being installed in new builds, and they're pushing this kind of electricity model. Number one, the electricity comes from most gas power plants anyway. There's obviously this big nuclear plant being built, and we do have about 20...
Crikey, did you hear someone say they wanted to cancel it the other day? They were calling it for it to be cancelled, despite half of it being... I can't remember who it was, but it was
It's been delayed and the budget's gone up. But yes. I mean, that's like every infrastructure project that's ever happened in the UK, I'd say.
Yeah.
But but with the heat pumps, they're expensive to install, right? So that's one thing. So a heat pump, air source heat pump, you're looking about 10k. A ground source heat pump, you're looking about 20k, right? The benefit is if you can afford that initial cost, there is a government subsidy or a government payment called the Renewable Heat Incentive, which pays you for the electricity you're producing, the heat you're producing from your heat pump, which will cover the cost over about 7 years. So this is one of the fundamental issues with government policy, that you are rewarding people who can afford this kind of low carbon tech potentially, when that's not really helping the kind of people that are in fuel poverty and need the help. But that's just another issue of government policy. So
I mean, unless you're building affordable homes for kind of low medium earners, and those homes are built on they use say ground source heat pump or air source heat pump
a community ground source heat pump.
Yes, and then everyone sort of wins, but very rarely that's the case for most people, I'd say.
In terms of running costs.
So it is. So the good thing about heat pumps, what I was saying earlier, if the compressor runs harder, then
But what's the other stipulation about fabric?
It needs to. So number one, if it runs harder, you use more electricity, so the efficiency of the heat pump goes down, right? So an air source heat pump, if you're trying to pull heat from 25-degree air, i.e. in the middle of the summer, it's no problem at all. Your heat pump runs really efficiently. If it drops down to 5 degrees, and I've got an air source heat pump, so I'm taking heat from the air, it has to work much harder to bring that temperature up, the hot water up to sort of 55 degrees. And so, number one, you need bigger radiators. You need better ways to get the kind of cooler temperatures to heat your house. But number two, there's no point installing a heat pump if you've got a badly insulated house, which you're about to allude to, I think.
Yes.
So either cavity wall, if it's a new house, then the cavities should be pretty well insulated. There should be minimal heat loss, loft insulation. If you've got a solid wall, before you consider a heat pump, you really have to put external wall insulation on it, right? So we're talking about bringing the U values of the walls, i.e. the efficiency of the walls, right down to kind of current standards. So that's a massive consideration. The benefit of the ground source heat pump, despite being twice the cost of an air source heat pump to install, is that, number one, the payments are bigger from the government, so they will still cover the cost over the 7 years.
Yeah.
But number two, the ground temperature about a metre down, and you can dig boreholes for these heat pumps 120 metres down, is relatively consistent all year round. So your efficiency doesn't change nearly as much with the seasons compared to the air source heat pump. So, air source heat pump, cost of running, basically they are considered about 350% efficient, i.e. 1 unit of electricity, it will produce 3.5 units of useful heat. Now this varies, so in the summer it might be 5.5, 1 unit of electricity, 5.5 units of useful heat. In the winter it might be 2 units of useful heat. That's the problem. What they do is they average this out, but I'm looking at turning my heating on in the winter, right? And so it obviously skews that number.
So an air source on average is about 2.5, isn't it?
It is, but when I need the heating, it's much lower, right? So it's 3.5, but when you need the heating, it's kind of more like 2.5, 2.5.
But it's what I'd say though is I don't think air source is too bad in the UK climate. So most of the country, because we don't get really that cold.
No, we don't
get
that
go
cold.
Iceland, I mean, for various reasons, I'd probably go geothermal or ground source heat pump there.
But with the air source heat pump, so if we're looking at say we go 3.5 or 2, what should we do? So 3 coefficient formats of 3. So 1 unit of electricity equals 3 units of useful heat. Your basically means that your 14p divided by 3, and that gives approximately 4 2/3, 4.7 ish p, which then suddenly becomes not a million miles from gas. Then we look at ground source heat pumps, and that efficiency is about 4.5. And so this is the game changer, right? So 1 unit of electricity, which costs 14p, produces 4.5 units of useful heat. And so if I take 14p and divide it by 4.5, I get something like 3 point something,
which is
comparable with gas,
or slightly cheaper. But also important to say, so very often also what you'd find is in where you put in the heat pumps, because you said about external wall insulation and excellent there's more due diligence towards the fabric.
Yes.
So the fabric is also the property that has the air source ground source and a comparable property that say has got a gas boiler. The one with the air source would probably have this is not.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Have a lower heat demand just because they've taken, they've done all that effort.
You've had to consider what you need to do before you install a heat pump.
Yeah, so if you're saying then the cost is comparable now, to run it versus gas, also I'm using less of it.
Yeah, so we're beginning to look at savings.
Yes.
Right, so that's a really important point. Actually, that's very good. So the heat pumps, again, it's all about this upfront cost of being able to afford to install them, and they are seriously expensive. Yeah,
unless you're doing new build or
unless you're doing new build but I think that's the way the government want to do them. That's the way the government want to go. So we'll see a lot more of those in the future, and obviously as more get installed, the efficiency improves just because the technology improves, and so they'll become bigger and bigger, sort of more common in houses, I guess. So that's heat pumps. Are you happy with that? Did that kind of make sense for everyone? So then last two, then we're going to go biomass.
Yeah.
So biomass is very much like it's like an oil central heating system, to be honest. Instead of oil, you're using little pellets normally. You can use kind of logs or whatever if you have those on site. Some biomass boilers will work with them, others won't. They'll just purely run on pellets. The issue is if you run out of pellets, you have no heating. They require a bit of maintenance because you've got to get rid of all the ash and all of that sort of stuff. However, you can still get the RHI on a biomass boiler. So you get paid for installing them.
It's what the government terms as carbon
neutral.
So it's only burning, or it's only burning the. I always get confused. It's you're basically the idea is you're replacing the recycled trees that you're burning.
So when you burn the tree, so the tree grows and it uses carbon dioxide to grow. Yeah, because it photosynthesizes. So it uses that carbon, so it locks it in, and then you burn it and it releases that carbon back in. But if you look at the overall cycle, the growth and then the burning, net zero. Yeah, so it's locking in the carbon as it grows, you burn it, and it releases it back out.
Is it net zero, though?
Because of the transportation.
So loads of our pellets come from Canada, which is bizarre, because we've got to ship them over. But
I guess if we're shipping whiskey over to Canada, then we need to fill.
Got to bring the boat backfill it with.
I was just saying, it is theoretically carbon neutral, but actually, it doesn't occur to a lot of people.
So it's best if the pellets are locally sourced. Ideally, right? So you want.
And also, you have to make the pellets.
Yeah.
Like trees don't grow into pellets.
Yeah. So there's.
So you've got to.
If that is, but presumably it's a byproduct, isn't it, of the timber industry? There's going to be something else.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. But you still got to make pellets. You got to. They've got to be little bits of wood, right?
I'm just trying to be on both camps. So someone's going to go, well, it's.
No, I think.
Kind of like agricultural biomass that'll take any kind of, literally any old crap
stuff.
Yes. No, agreed. And
those ones are great.
They are, and they tend to. I think you said in the last episode they work really well. For farmers and stuff who have that at hand.
And I think it's ideal. So where you've got some sort of activity in a rural setting, whether it's a farm or some sort of production, you've got locally sourced pellets that are a byproduct of something else. So otherwise they would have been burnt and into the atmosphere. At least here they're being used for something else.
Okay, so is that
that's the
biomass?
Positive spin of it. Yeah.
Right, last one, and this is more of a warning, right? So immersion heaters.
And why is it a warning? The warning is, if you've got a hot water. So if you've got a combination boiler, then don't worry about it. But if you've got a hot water tank, very often it has an immersion switch with it. So now the immersion switch doesn't run from your main heating system. It uses electricity.
So it's like a giant kettle.
So you've got basically a coil within that tank. If you turn on the immersion heater, it will heat that coil up, as you said, like your kettle. And it will keep that hot water store. Now, if you keep that switch on and you never turn it off, we get lots of questions about Harry. You get complaints all the time. Even if someone's like, "Why? I'm not using my heating, but why is my energy bill? Why is my energy bill so high in the summer? I'm not using lighting and all that." And you go, "Oh, but have you checked the immersion switch?" It's like, what's an immersion switch? Well, it's that thing that It's either in your cupboard
Yeah.
where your hot tank is, or it's just immediately to the outside of it. So turn it off and
And the issue with it is everyone has been had a shower or a bath or whatever, and the hot water has run out, and immediately you go to your parents, you shout, and they're like, "Oh, we'll just go and turn the immersion on." So you go and turn the immersion on, and then everyone forgets, and then you see an energy bill, 3 months later, and it's enormous. You're like, where has that come from? And they, teaching your children where the immersion switch is a dangerous life lesson, because we've seen it. We have seen it happen where the bills are really big. The other place where the immersion heaters are quite common is where you have electric heating, so storage heaters, and you have this hot water tank, and you have to produce hot water you can't produce from your storage heater, and so the immersion is running, but they tend to have two immersion units on the hot water tank. One is running on the cheap electricity at night, and one is running on the more expensive electricity. So if you're running it on that, you only want to run it on the cheap electricity. There will still be two switches. Yeah? So, do you want to do a really quick recap? Do you want me to fly through it?
Yeah.
2 seconds.
What do you think is the cheapest way to heat your home?
Gas, if you've got a central heating system and you need to replace it, gas central heating is the best. It would be very unlikely to go from gas to electric. Electric heating is great because it's convenient. You can only heat, you can decide to heat only one room at a time. Electric heating can be very efficient if you're looking at heat pumps, ground source heat pumps in particular.
Or if you've got some kind of microgeneration like solar panels.
We haven't even considered that. Yeah, fair point. So if you're producing your own electricity or there's electricity storage, then obviously electric heating is really sensible. But,
the
basically...
counter to that is that there's the problem with the latent heat in the colder months. It's the same with the lack of sunlight in the winter for solar PV. So when you need that energy to supply your electric heating source, there's not a lot of it in the UK. Because
No, I don't think you would do it only with solar, but you could definitely get...
It would help.
It would help.
Yeah, it would help. But I think it really, really depends on your situation. So what's the cheapest way to heat my house is I think it's up for debate, basically. And it really depends on your situation. We're definitely going to get comments saying, that's absolute nonsense you're talking about, and I do this, that, and the other. Perfect. Comment away. We'll try and come back to them if we can.
Well, this is just
to give a bit of a view.
If you're defending gas, I find that you get a lot of electric heating champions.
Yeah,
the comment, because they just love electric heating. They love the efficiency
and you'll get
of it.
Yeah, I mean we've really not come under fire, but electric heating can be efficient. It can be it's pretty bog standard. And we've had some electric heating manufacturers come after us. I'm not going to name them, but they've really gone for us and said, "Well, how dare you write this, etc., etc." But at the end of the day, if you're trying to improve your efficiency rate, if you're trying to rent out a property, or you're trying to improve the sort of efficiency and the cheapest way to heat your home, then electric heating might not be the way to go. But you can get in touch with us and we can advise.
And if the environmental impact is your most important thing, so basically anything that combusts a hydrocarbon fuel, so going from your dirtiest probably is the oil, which you'd
coal.
Agree. Well, I don't know how many people have got coal-fired boilers. Maybe they do in the countryside.
No, but you're producing electricity from coal.
No, I'm talking about
in your house.
In your house, yeah.
Okay.
So oil being the dirtiest, and then you've got gas and LPG, biomass potentially, but obviously what we talked about the carbon neutrality of it, and then you've got the electric heating sources being low carbon. However, if you are getting that electricity from
but you don't get to make that choice. I mean, you
don't. It's just where
you're all drinking out the same pot, aren't you?
No, I agree. But hands are tied there.
Yeah.
You can pay for your green energy tariff.
To make that point, because people always think, because it's electric, there's no emissions, immediate emissions, it's zero emissions. But you've got to see where the...
It's definitely less emissions, though, so that's good.
Yeah, true. Cool. Okay, well, hopefully that's answered a few queries. And what we'll do in the next episode is talk about some of the other questions we've actually been asked specifically. Have you got any news for us?
Well, no, there's been a lot of criticism on Hinkley Point C, just not namely because it's been over budget. I don't know how many times it's been over budget, but it was to do with a report, and Harry, you might have to sort of find this and list it in the comments. about the cost of offshore wind coming down significantly. So I don't know, even go back 2 years ago, it was well over sort of the £100 a megawatt hour, whatever it was. But now it's kind of low 20s type thing. Whereas obviously Hinkley, you're talking £75-80.
Yeah.
So policymakers are saying, well, what's the point of us throwing whatever it is, 25-30 billion at Hinkley? When we've got offshore wind.
I mean, the argument
However, the
is
intermittency. Yeah,
it's all about intermittency. We need something stable.
But you've asked me to talk about news.
I want good news.
That's
I
what
want good. I want under budget.
That's what the you
I
might
want
be happy
free
with
electricity
this news.
for
You
all.
might be happy with this news. I think they are seriously looking at. Well, I mean, not I think, but they are seriously looking at the business case for HS2.
That makes me happy.
So I don't. So where they are with it, I don't necessarily think that they will scrap it outright, but it might be still happen, but in a.
So I bet you now they'll
HS2
cancel
light.
it. No, they'll cancel it.
Long-time listeners will know that James is a real fan of chatting about HS2.
No, they'll cancel it. I bet you they'll cancel it. I am convinced of it.
They'll find a kind of cheaper compromise.
I mean, or they could just use the existing train line.
Yes, that's what I mean.
That's what they compromise. They'll use the line that already exists. It takes
Upgrade the existing line.
14 minutes slower or whatever. Bloody
not
ridiculous.
not the main West Coast main line, but the.
Anyway, I mean, I don't know. I think we're going off topic.
We are, but it's.
We're on the wrong track.
It's.
Thank you very much.
It's still the lowest. It's the lowest carbon way to travel, train travel. So it is.
What
it
about
is
a
dear.
bike?
Yes, but you've got to use a lot of cornflakes for that to power that.
True.
Fuel source.
Just throwing it out there.
Anyway.
Cool. So, any other news, or are we all done for another week?
I don't know. Yeah, there hasn't been really much stuff on.
There's one thing dominating the
No,
headlines,
yeah,
and
we
we don't want to talk about that.
But I think because of that point that's been dominating, there's not been a lot of stuff out there in the other departments, namely in our department. But we await any good news, hopefully.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for listening and watching.
Yeah, and then if you've got questions and comments, please put them down below in the YouTube or send us an email, and then we'll endeavour to answer them and come back to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.